We walk over to the room. It's in a building. It's on the 3rd floor. Very quickly, the room fills up. It's about 50-50 supporters versus protesters in the room. But they very quickly reached the maximum capacity, to which the administrators who were present said, we're not allowing anyone else in the room. And I was cool with that. I understood up at this point that there was some counter events going on, some protests around campus, one of which they organized this big sign-making event where the protesters, they got together and they all made signs and they all walked over together. They orchestrated a sit-in to where they sat in the speech, which again, I understand. That's your right to protest. You have the right to organize. By no means do I think that I'm worthy of stopping that. That's understandable, as long as, again, it's civil and somewhat respectful, right? So I was able to deliver my speech. I talked for probably 40 minutes, and let me reiterate what my speech was. I talked about what it takes to compete at that level, my background, how this is a lifelong journey. I talked about the competition. I talked about the locker room. I talked about the silencing piece, not just from the female athletes, but parents, administrators, medical professionals even. Nothing opinionated. Really, my speech, there's no opinions in it. It's strictly my experience. So I was able to deliver the speech. I answered questions afterwards, to which I was met with lots of questions and oppositions, which I find extremely easy to answer. Whether they take my answer, that's on them, but they're all easy to answer. But it was only after the speech. I just had concluded. It had been probably an hour. Everyone was standing up to leave. And as people were standing to leave, first of all, I should mention, while I was giving my speech, I could hear people outside the building. I could hear them chanting, and it was a large group of people, you could tell. I could hear them chanting things such as trans women are women, or other chants they could come up with. But as I continued my speech, I could hear chants getting closer and closer, to when I concluded, I could hear these people right outside the hallway, to where one side of the hallway would yell, "Trans rights are under attack." The other side of the hallway would yell back, "What do? We fight back." And so I could hear this, which was a bit unnerving, just to know that they were right outside the door. But again, I didn't really let it bother me. That's not something that necessarily shook me at the time. But everyone stood up to leave. All of a sudden, a mob of people enter into the room. They rush into the room. They flicker the lights. They turn the lights off. And this is when they rush to the podium where I was and some other members of the Turning Point chapter were. And this is where we were met with assault and violence. And
so they turned the lights off. So how dark is it in there when the lights are off?
This period is a blur to me. It all happened so quickly. I felt so disoriented. I felt so jostled. I felt so confused. What is happening? I was told, granted, I never talked with the police before this, but the Turning Point members told me, the police said they're going to lock the doors at a certain time. There should be no problems. We'll be good. So I was under the impression that the doors would be locked, which they were not. So it all just happened so quickly. But yes, they turned the lights off, and it was nighttime outside, so it's pitch black in this room, which of course you have to imagine.
So it's really dark. Oh, so that was a sneaky little move.
You have to imagine.
Yeah, the campus police are completely. Of course it's intentional. They know exactly what they're doing, and the campus police are 100% unprepared for any real aggression.
Absolutely.
They're. Yeah. And I mean, to some degree, that's on them and it's on the administration, but it's also outside their normal course of training and activity. They have no idea what to do. So the idea that you're going to be protected by campus police on campus, you can bloody well just forget about that. That's not going to happen. Okay, so now it's dark. And who is it that's rushing you exactly? And how many of them are there?
A mob of trans rights activists, whether that be trans individuals themselves, whether that be people within this LGBTQ community, whether that be someone who just considers themselves an ally to this community. There were so many different, I don't want to say combinations of a person, but there were men dressed as women and women dressed as men and everything in between. So it was very, again, disorienting. It was like, who am I being met with? What is happening? So as the lights are flickering, the lights are on, they're off, an officer approaches me very quickly, and she grabs me. And she's wearing nothing that indicates she's an officer. And again, I hadn't met her. She never alerted me she was in the room. Her face is covered with a mask. And she tells me very quickly, trying to pull me along, as more people are filtering into the room. She says, "Come with me. I'm with the police." And I didn't believe her. Why would I believe her, right? So I was very hesitant. I was reluctant, but truthfully, I had no other choice at this point because we were being rushed at the front of the room. So we kind of navigate out of the room. We're only met with more protesters once we get into the hallway. We couldn't even come out of the door of the classroom because there were so many people filtering in that we had to go out this back door that led us to another classroom to get out that way. To which when we got to the hallway, you look down to the staircase, there's hundreds of people. You look down to the other staircase, of course, which is your exit path to get out of the building, and it's hundreds of people. So ultimately, we had no other choice than this officer led me to another room along that same hallway where I was barricaded for 3 hours, over 3 hours, which was interesting. It was, you in those moments, in those hours, you fear for your life, hearing what these people are yelling, hearing the things they want to do to you. An array of things, all of which were violent and vengeful and hateful, and all of the words, of course, in the guys.
Well, let's hear them. What did they tell you?
Some of the things they were yelling.
Away.
One of the terms they kept using, which I think is so ironic, they kept saying, "We fight back." And I thought about this, and I thought, the day before this event, the press secretary of the Biden administration, in a press conference, said the words, "Our trans community, they're resilient and they fight back." And so it just kept replaying in my head. Wow, they're using verbatim the same verbiage that Jean-Pierre, whatever her name is using. They were yelling things.
I see. So this is right from the top. That's one of the things that really makes you wonder just exactly what country you're in at a time like that, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
When the people who are threatening you and barricading you in because you're objecting to being, what would you say, subjected to an unfair competition by any reasonable standard, and now you're being mobbed by half-demented lunatics who are directly acting out words that have come from the highest possible state or, federal authorities. Yeah, that's real cute.